I hear that clapping. It's not allowed in church. Jeez. All right. Good morning. That's the last time we're going to play that for a little while. Thank you, Lincoln. Jeez, I thought that would elicit a little bit more. Oh. All right. We'll see if we get that for the song that we're doing this week. Actually, you're going to hear more of it this week. All right, my name is Tim. If you don't know me already, I'm lead pastor here at City Church, and we're so glad that you're here. We are finishing off our summer playlist series. That's good right there. See, I made sure I had my son go get coffee so that Dave could bring it to me, so Dave could actually see the Dancing Stormtroopers one more time, because he was sad that he missed that last week. So we're concluding our summer playlist series, a series that we've gone, this is the eighth week, I think. We've gone through a whole bunch of stuff from the 60s with the Beatles and Yesterday to 1971, Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. And we watched these songs as they actually got reintroduced to the mainstream, all within the last 10, 15 years. Living on a Prayer, we watched the video there, even that video of 270 people performing the thing in Gorky Park in Moscow. What else have we done? We did Shake It Off last week. I don't even remember what I did the week before. It's all a blur now. And so we're going to finish it off this week with a fun song, and it'll be great. So, from about the age of 4, I would go every summer. I would go up to Northern Ontario, and I would participate. When I was really young, they just had sort of childcare programs for us. My older brother and sister, they were campers, so they were off doing stuff. My parents would work there so that we could go there for free and that sort of stuff. And this camp was run by InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe you haven't. It doesn't really matter. It's a major international student ministry. And they've run these camps. I think they actually just about celebrated their 90th anniversary that they've been doing this up north. My mom grew up doing that, and they wanted to do this sort of stuff. So, I remember spending, a process of about 5 weeks up in Northern Ontario in the woods, which is actually my wife's definition of hell. Preach it. There you go. Her idea of camping is a 5-star hotel. So I remember very clearly sorry, what? 4-star. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. You're rocking it, yeah. So I remember when I was about 8 or 9 at camp, and I'd see a number of different people wearing this T-shirt, and it kind of looked like this. Had this on the front. And I had no idea what this was. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what a U2 was, or what a U2 did. I didn't know any of that sort of stuff. Years later, I heard about a U2 spy plane, but I didn't think that had anything to do with them. Other than just sounding cool. And so that was 8 or 9 years old. I started seeing these a lot, and I heard about U2, especially in certain contexts. A few years later, I was on my first mission trip to Poland in 1989, and I was up in northwestern Poland, and while I was there, I was with this group of American and Canadian teenagers, and I kept hearing a couple of them talk about this band, U2. I'd heard of U2 for years, but they would actually be singing some of these songs. One, I won't even mention what they were right now, but singing these different songs through the summer, and it was just sort of like this was a really big deal for them. And so of course I heard these, and I actually remember, I know the first song that I actually sort of learned by them. I hadn't even heard the song, but I knew it from my friends singing it, and that was the first song I heard. And a little while later, after I was back home from my missions trip, a friend was visiting one time, and he mentioned U2, and I'm like, I've never actually heard U2. He looked at me in astonishment and ran out to his car practically, and he brought this back in. Go ahead. Ever seen one of those? He brought this in. In fact, mine looked exactly like this, minus the case. I didn't have a case. He just brought me the cassette. This is what we grew up with, right? So he gave me this cassette. He's like, you keep this, right? So this was my introduction to U2, and it was incredible. I remember described it to my wife this week. I took that cassette and put it in my dual cassette player, that I got for Christmas, and I put on my desk, right? And so I put that in there. I put some headphones on or whatever, and just press play, and just sort of get swept away in this world. Now, the only problem was that the first song that I ever heard by them was actually a cover of another band a band that we've already represented. And it was actually a band, maybe you've heard of them, called the Beatles. And so it was actually, a cover of that. But, listening to this thing, it was, edgy, kind of wild, and I was hooked to this sound and sort of this feel of what it was. I actually only heard the Beatles version of Helter Skelter this week. I'd never heard it before. I figured I should finally go back and listen to it after 30 years. So I went back and listened to it, and yeah, the YouTube version's better. Yeah, it is. Anyhow, I would argue, I'm a little bit biased. You could argue, anybody could argue, that they are the greatest band of all time for different reasons. All right, for different reasons. If you look at some of the stuff that they've done, it's remarkable whether you were going to put them in that category or not, for Preston's sake. They've won 22 Grammy Awards, double the next rock band on the list, 15 more than a certain other band that we already mentioned. They're the only rock band to ever have more than one Album of the Year win. So they've done a lot of that, and they've won a lot of awards, not to mention the longevity that they are. 1976, they were formed. It was just 4 kids, 4 teenagers, 2 of them 16, 2 of them 15, in a high school in Dublin. They were there. Larry Mullen Jr. went and put a notice up in school saying, we want to form a rock band. And he got a whole bunch of kids there, and they all sort of showed up at Larry Mullen Jr.'s kitchen and sort of talked about stuff. And none of them actually knew how to play anything, but they figured they wanted to start a rock band. They were coming on the heels of the punk rock movement, so they didn't figure that was a big deal anyway. It wasn't going to hold them back. But 43 years later, they're still making music. These same 4 guys again and again. And they've continually reinvented themselves. They're self-deprecating, about certain aspects of their work. Bono has actually watched himself on interviews. Bono's the lead singer, by the way. If you haven't heard of them before, I heard that discussion before we started. He'd watched himself on late-night interviews and think to himself afterwards, man, was I ever a donkey's behind? Watching that sort of thing. That's like, what was I doing? Who was that? That was just awful. In fact, one of the reasons he says he admires and respects a lot of the people that they sing about, a lot of people that they've spent time with, is because he says he's not like them, and he wants to be like them. One of the things that has defined them from really the very, very beginning is their relationship with Christianity. Their relationship with faith. While they were getting their feet on the ground just as a band back in the 70s, they joined a group called the Shalom Christian Fellowship. And they were part of this group for a little while. And just 3 of the 4 band members, the fourth never actually joined it. And they were part of this for a little while, and it was a big part of their formation at that point. They're late teens and they're developing. But as they rose in prominence, members of this fellowship decided that really these guys should leave rock and roll. They shouldn't be performing it. They said it was incompatible with their faith, and they should really lay it down for Christ. Put away the music as a sacrifice to Him. But feeling that God had given them gifts that they ought to use, they actually left the fellowship, but they did not leave faith behind. So throughout their career, they've worn their identity of who they are in Christ, the 3 of them anyway. Often not in the way that groups like that fellowship would like them to have done so, but certainly they did it in an honest and open way. The lead singer Bono has never shied away from telling people why he believes what he believes and telling them about it. He's even sent copies of What's So Amazing About Grace. You've seen this book here. He's even sent copies of What's So Amazing About Grace. I've referred to this book many, many times in sermons, to fellow rockers that he's had conversations about faith with afterwards, like Noel Gallagher of Oasis. After they've had these long conversations about faith. I think Billy Corgan might be another one too, of Smashing Pumpkins and other bands. Bono said this: Judeo-Christianity is about the idea that God is interested in you as opposed to a God that is interested in you. This is a radical thought, that God who created the universe might be interested in me. It was the most extraordinary thought. University courses on the work of U2 can be taken. Conferences held on the body of work of U2 are held every few years in Belfast. So we could talk about their 40-plus years of work, their music, their writings, their charitable work, just all across the board, and all the richness of the songs that they've written for all these years. But we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it pretty simple this morning. I just want to focus on one song this morning. It's a song that the band has actually used sometimes as a closing prayer, certainly for one tour. They used as a closing prayer leading into 40, which is, you should look that one up and then look up Psalm 40 side by side and watch those. It's a song that they've used to almost close off their concerts sometimes. And it's from a few albums ago, but it's one of my 30 or 40 favorite songs by U2. I could have tried, With or Without You, or Where the Streets Have No Name, Pride in the Name of Love, one of Preston's there. One, Mysterious Ways, that was actually the runner-up. But I arrived at a song that was on an album called How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb that, funnily enough, the person who gave that album to me is actually in attendance here this morning. She just showed up here beside my wife many, many years ago for my 30th birthday, so that was a long time ago. It goes like this. Here's an excerpt from the video. It goes on like this a little while later. Take this city, a city should be shining on a hill. Take this city, if it be your will. What no man can own, no man can take. Take this heart and make it break. One of the themes that you begin to see as you listen to U2 from the very beginning, right up until the music that they've been making most recently. There's a theme that sort of runs through the whole thing. One of many themes. But one theme in particular is sort of what we talk about it a lot in church when we talk about the kingdom of God. Ever heard that term? It's sort of about the now and not yet. It's sort of about the sin nature and the new nature that you've been given in Christ. This sort of, you're here in the present, but you're looking towards the future. We've talked about this in this series, that the stuff now, we aren't just waiting for something to happen. We are to be a reflection of what's going to happen. So it's this sort of tension of now and not yet, something coming. That God is busy restoring creation to himself. It's also a theme that we see as we go through Scripture. It's something that God's been working at since the moment humans sort of screwed it all up. So it's the moment we showed up on the scene and boom, we just wrecked it all by choosing to go our own way. Some people have done this. They've actually broken down the entire, what we would call God's story. It's the story of creation. But you'd break it down into like 4 different chapters. It would go like this: creation, fall, redemption, restoration. We're still kind of in that redemption section. But what has happened is that a lot of Christians, they really love focusing on the two in the middle. They forget the first, they forget the last, and they have no idea where they come from or where they're going, and how those things fit into who they are and what they do and what they're doing. When God created the universe, he declared that it was good. He was happy with it. And then, we messed it up. But even in messing it up, even while broken, we know that creation is still a reflection, a broken reflection, a cracked reflection, but it's still a reflection of God and his character. We read in Psalms 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the works of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world. So it sounds like he's pretty happy with it, and this is how it's being described, right? Isaiah 40, Isaiah wrote this: lift your eyes and look to the heavens, who created all these. He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls them each by name. He knows them. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. We keep going. Psalm 139, commonly attributed to David, writing about how God knows him. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. God created the universe, and then we messed it up. It wasn't the other way around. And it doesn't take a postgraduate degree in astrophysics to realize that there's some problems in our world, that our world is a little bit messed up, that creation is broken in some way. Why do things happen the way that they do? It doesn't take a genius to figure that out, or to realize that there's stuff wrong with you, too. We can't even keep our own rules. We say that we're going to do something to ourselves, right? And then we don't do it. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to get in shape. 2 months later, or less. I'm going to diet. I'm going to lose 20 pounds. 20 pounds the other direction later, we can't even keep our own dumb rules. So imagine how much more likely it is that we've actually broken the way that God has intended for things to happen. In a way, broken his rules. From the beginning, that when we messed it up, God has planned a way, though, for us to make it right again, that we restore all creation to himself, to the relationship that he intended for us to have with him since the beginning. Through Jesus, all of it can be made new. That's the whole thing when we look at redemption. That's Jesus coming in and making that possible, that we could actually be in relationship with the God of the universe, as Bono says, as David says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. But how amazing is it that the God of the universe, the God who created all things that we can see and can't see, he cares for me. How incredible is that? Through Jesus, all of it can be made new. Jesus himself said this, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. We're coming into a relationship with God. God of the universe, the God who created the universe, is actually interested in little old insignificant me. Little old insignificant you. And through him, all things are being made new. And through him, we can actually have life. Through him, all creation can have life again. Really, life as it was meant to be. A relationship restored. The Apostle John, in writing a prophecy by God in Revelation, a book that most of us don't touch very too much. Revelation 21:5, and he who is seated on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. He's restoring creation to himself. That includes you. He wants to transform you into the person he created you to be. The Apostle Paul, writing to the church in Rome, got really specific about what it looked like to follow Jesus. Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to this world, but be what? Be what? By the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. He desires for you to be transformed. Not into something you shouldn't be. Not into some weird thing that you hate. But he desires to transform you into the person that you were created to be from the very beginning. Even before you were born, the person he had destined for you. Ephesians 4, Paul writing again to a different church. You were taught with regard to your former way of life, the past, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. We've talked about that in this series. But to be made new in the attitude of your minds. Sounds like we're echoing the Romans passage. And to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Creating us and transforming us to become the person we were actually created to be. You were made to do and to be something new. What may seem like the natural thing for us sometimes is not the thing we should do. It may feel completely natural, like this is what everything's telling you, this is what I should do. But really, it's not what you should do. Because if you learn nothing else, that so much of the time, what we ought to do is counterintuitive. We've called it the upside down, right? Turn it upside down. Sometimes I have one friend who said, actually, if we just acted counterintuitively on everything, we'd probably be okay. Go opposite to the way that we sort of naturally move into things. You are made to do and be something new. What may seem like the natural thing to do may not be the thing that you should do. This is reflected in the lyrics that we just heard. Take these hands, don't make a fist, no. Take this mouth, so quick to criticize. Is that you or is that just me? Yeah, I do that a little bit. Take this mouth, give it a kiss. They're saying, God, these are things that my hands don't want to do. Or rather, turn it around. These are the things that I want to do. I want to make a fist. I want to criticize with my mouth. These are things that I want to do. These are the things that I'm naturally inclined to do. But these are not things that I know you want them to do. Take them, use them, help me do what I should do rather than what I want to do. This is part of the restoration work that's already happening in you. If you've sort of given your life to Jesus, if you've begun to follow him, This is some of the transformation work that's already begun in you. It won't be completed yet, but it has begun in you. The now and not yet, right? See, what people get stuck on, as I said before, is that redemption chapter. They just sort of get stuck there. They don't pay much attention to the first two and ignore the last. What's the minimum I have to do to get to the good place? What's the minimum I have to do? Or we focus on just getting people to accept chapter 3 and then just completely put no effort into any restoration or transformation. Our focus is so much on just getting them to cross that line, and then once they're across that line, they're in. Okay, we're done. Who's next? And we move on. Christianity can sometimes be referred to or used as sort of like a get-out-of-hell free card. A friend of mine, actually, I think it was Jehovah's Witnesses showed up at his door, and he told them he already had fire insurance. It's not, to me, a get-out-of-hell free card. It becomes just about where that just becomes just about where you go after you die. It's about much, much more than that. Our time in life is not just waiting around at the bus stop, waiting for the next bus to heaven. That's not what we're doing. N.T. Wright, he wrote in his book, Simply Christian, wrote this: the point of Christianity is not to go to heaven when you die. Rather, it is putting the whole creation to rights, the restoration. You are part of that. You are being restored, and God is inviting you to be a part of the restoring of his creation. Making all things new, not starting from scratch, restoration, not demolition. He goes on to write in his book, Surprised by Hope, you are not oiling the wheels of a machine that's about to roll over a cliff. You are not restoring a great painting that's shortly going to be thrown in the fire. You are not planting roses in a garden that's about to be dug up for a building site. You are, strange as it may seem, almost as hard to believe as the resurrection itself, accomplishing something that will become in due course part of God's new world. His restored creation. Really the whole time, God is inviting us into real life. Not just an afterlife. He's inviting you into real life, life the way that he intended, life abundantly. And he's inviting you to be a part of his story, this story that we've talked about. He's inviting you to be a part of this. And he's inviting you to be a part of what he's doing. The best part is that he's not going to force you to be a part of it. He's not going to force you to play a role in it. He's a gentleman like that. To force you would not be an act of love, nor would it elicit love from you. It's always a choice. God will not force you to do this. He'll do this with or without you, but he'll do it. And he won't force you to be a part of it. The only person who gets to choose for you is you. Not your friends, not your wife, not your mama. You. And what have you chosen? Have you chosen life? What are you going to choose if you haven't already made that choice? Because here's the thing about life. To really live it, we need to keep moving forward. You don't do it by moving backwards. You need to keep changing. If you meet somebody at the age of 40 and you knew them 20 years ago and they haven't changed, that's a problem. We should be changing. We should be getting better. We should be transforming. You need to keep changing, and that means that you need to keep choosing to move forward too. It's an intentional thing. It's not a passive thing. You need to move forward, to walk on. There are enough people in this world who've made that choice once and decided or figured that that's going to carry them through until the next thing. That one time to carry them through to the end of this life. But they're missing the point. Choose to be transformed. Choose to be a part of God's transforming work. Choose to be salt in a world looking for flavor. Take these hands. Take this mouth and restore them to what they ought to be, along with the rest of me.